Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 14, Episode 2 overall, 717 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment. Brought to you by our friends at Cullen Chevrolet dealership, located at 905 Woodlawn Road in vehicles, along with the great selection of all electric vehicles and Cadillac vehicles, EVs as well. You can call the dealership at 519-824-0210 and tell Tom I sent you, or you can email them at info@barrycullen.com. Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership has been family run and operated here in the city of Gulf since 1969. I hope everyone is doing well on this Monday, June 8th, 2026. I had a busy weekend being at the Niagara Falls Comic Con. I want to say thank you to Chad Smith for my media pass, and it was really cool meeting people like Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, Vicki Lawrence, Mindy Cohn from the Facts of Life. Please check out my social media pages for my Niagara Falls Comic Con interviews as well. I'm looking forward to my guest tonight. This is his first appearance in almost 4 years, and his name is Dave Naylor. He is TSN's NFL and CFL insider, and we're going to bring on Dave right now. We're going to talk a little CFL and maybe a little NFL as well.
She could have sort of scheduled me in between, Mindy Cohn and Lou Ferrigno or something. Like that's
I was unbelievable.
quite an assortment. Yeah, I think did Lou Ferrigno try to play football at one point? I seem to just have this like vague idea that like the Argos might have tried to sign him or something at one point, but I may be making that up. That's just, he's kind of my era, right? From when I was a kid, he was a significant figure in the imagination of 8-year-old boys.
I know Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who was a pro wrestler. He played for the Argos briefly in '79, and Lex Luger, who was a pro wrestler too. He played for the Montreal Alouettes in the early '80s as well.
Okay, and of course, the most famous of them all, Dwayne Johnson, who, the interesting thing, and I know we're going to get into CFL. This will maybe lead us into CFL talk. So the fascinating thing for me about Dwayne Johnson is that he was at camp with these Calgary Stampeders in 1995. Now, at that time, he had to try to make the team as an American because his father is from Halifax. So he didn't have Canadian citizen. He didn't qualify. In those days, you had to have played football in Canada or spent a certain amount of your life in Canada. There were different sort of standards for what meant a Canadian. But of course, nowadays, if you got a Canadian parent, you're Canadian. We got all kinds of kids. We had a kid who was taken in the first round this year who his first time ever in Canada was the CFL Combine. The linebacker from Angelo State, who Saskatchewan took. So if you go to 1995, if we had the rules of today in 1995, Dwayne Johnson would have gone to Calgary Stampeder camp as a Canadian, made the team, probably would have had a 12, 14-year career, and the story of WWE and Hollywood would be different.
Dave, did you get a chance to interview or speak with Dwayne when he was with Calgary in '95?
No, I was covering the league in 95. In fact, I was living in Regina, but I do not remember him. And he didn't make the team. So unless you were covering Calgary Stampeders training camp.
Okay, Dave's Wi-Fi just froze up, guys. So hopefully we'll get Dave back on. Dave Naylor from TSN is joining us, the NFL CFL insider. He was just talking about Dwayne the Rock Johnson, who's with Calgary. Are you back, Dave?
I am. Now, listen, we're doing this off my phone. Would it be easier if we did it off my computer? Do you want me to try it that way?
Ideally, they say with StreamYard, they say laptop ideally is better than a phone.
Okay, let's do it. I'll jump right back on my laptop. Sounds good. See ya.
Okay. Yeah. See you in a minute. As we wait for Dave to come back on, I'm going to play a little interview that I did with Wonder Years actor Jason Hervey. Jason Hervey, who was at the Niagara Falls Comic Con. I'm going to play the interview right now as we wait for Dave Naylor from TSN to come back on. So this is my interview with Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years, Back to the Future, and Police Academy that I did just Friday in Niagara Falls. So just bear with me 1 second. Chris Pomey here live at the Niagara Falls Comic Con here at the Niagara Falls Convention Center. I have a special guest here. He is from the Wonder Years, actor Jason Hervey. Jason, just thoughts on being here this weekend for the Comic Con?
Oh man, I'm having a great time. First of all, it's my first signing in Canada, and traditionally I haven't done a lot of these, cons and conventions to begin with. But I really am glad that I'm doing them, because the fans are just so incredible and they're so passionate, about pop culture and film and television, and some of the memorabilia that they're having me sign and showing me, from whether it's Monster Squad, Back to the Future, the Wonder Years, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Police Academy, Back to School, all these different projects that I've been in over time. It's so great, to kind of keep those, memories alive and those conversations happening. And, you should definitely check out Doc's Time Machines, because he's got, the DeLorean and, the Toyota 4x4 truck and, the Johnny B. Good guitar. There's just so much fun stuff there. And everyone's so kind. I love being in Canada. Everyone is so nice. Really having a ball. Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be back again in the future.
Yeah. Back in the future. I saw what you did there. Sure. If they'll have me back, love to be back. Great part of the world here. And Niagara Falls, super special. 2026 Niagara Falls Con, having a great time.
Jason, how did you get involved with Back to the Future movie, Police Academy, and how you end up with your role on the Wonder Years?
Honestly, all of them have the same answer. It was just, a call that I got, from my agent, being a kid and, growing up in the entertainment business and, being an actor. And when I, got the call, I just, went in and read my sides and auditioned for, the casting director, producer, director, writers, whatever. I was very fortunate, to get the part. There's, heavy competition, there's, a lot of people who, growing up as a kid actor that were, doing what I was doing. But for whatever, reason, they liked my look. They liked my line delivery. When the writer was writing the part, he had, I kind of matched up, that vision that the writer had, or, it's just kind of one of those things that all, everything kind of, all the connective tissue was there for me to get the part. So I'm just grateful I did.
How would you? All right, I'm going to conclude. I'm going to play the rest of this interview with Jason Hervey as my guest Dave Naylor is back on right now.
There we go.
Hey, Dave,
sorry
how
about
are
that.
you?
Yeah, we should be better now.
Yeah, no worries. And I always make sure I have a plan B and plan C, especially snudgy sometimes these days.
All right.
I think we got you back on. Okay. Yeah, Dave, you were just talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in Calgary in 1995.
That had the CFL's rules of today applied in 1995, Dwayne Johnson would have been at camp trying to make the Calgary Stampeders as a Canadian, which of course is a easier task than making it as an American, just because of the numbers. He probably would have made the team as a Canadian who played at the University of Miami as a defensive end, and he probably would have had a 12 or 14-year CFL career. So, the story of WWE and the story of Hollywood action movies might be very different had the CFL had the rules of today in 1995. Ultimately, Dwayne Johnson was cut. Nobody I know who covered the league remembers him. But as if you've ever covered a CFL training camp, you know how easy it would be to, miss a random defensive end from X school who's, there for 17 days and then gets cut.
Oh, and there's one other wrestler that was with the Edmonton Eskimos back in 1999, Roman Reigns, who played with them before becoming a pro wrestler too.
Yeah, it's a transition that has been made by many, not as successfully, of course, for most as with Dwayne Johnson, who turned out to be a lot more famous for that than he was for football.
Hey, Dave, I just want to get your thoughts on the biggest news with the CFL, the new TV deal with Bell Media, TSN, and the online and demand servicing. Just thoughts on and how much of an impact this is going to have going for the CFL and the players in the next 5-10 years.
Well, I guess, the biggest thing in terms of how it's going to impact the league is financially. I mean, if you believe the figure that's been reported that it's worth about $500 million. And I, for one, do believe that figure. That comes out to about $83 million a year. And the reported figures for the current deal are about 50. So when your league television revenue goes from 50 million to 83, that's going to have a substantial impact on everything from the way the league office is able to operate to the way the teams operate. It has implications for expansion. Certainly can drive franchise value. This is what Stuart Johnston was hired to do, and he sat on the opposite side of the negotiating table from where he used to sit when he ran TSN. The big difference for us is that TSN will not be the exclusive rights holder as it has been since, I believe, 2008. Now, we used to be the smaller partner, I guess, when CBC had the majority of the deal, and then we took it over, and now we're going to be the bigger partner with DAZN. I think from TSN's perspective, I think, we're legitimately very happy with this deal. I mean, we have Thursday and Friday night football. We actually are going to cover more playoff games, even though we don't have them all because of the expansion of the playoff games. We remain exclusive on the Grey Cup. I think those are things that are, very important and exciting for TSN. And I think, the league has gone down the path that pretty much every other league has gone down. So, I think we all kind of from a distance, and I haven't covered this up close, anticipated that the CFL would want to bring on a streaming partner because that's what every other league seems to be doing. They want to explore and get a foot into that world of where a lot of people think broadcast entertainment is going, and certainly has trended, in time. So, gives them a global footprint as well. DAZN is known in over 200 countries. I can't think of, look, I say I can't think of a negative. I have heard a negative. I hear some people say, well, I'm gonna have to buy another package, to watch the Saturday night CFL game. Again, this is a reality of our time. And I would say that if you love CFL football, like you love other entertainment that people pay for, that's, not everything, like sometimes you pay for things you love in life. And that's what fans are going to have to do with DAZN.
And this will give the league more exposure, especially on YouTube, correct?
Yeah, I'll be candid. I don't fully understand the component of the YouTube component. I know there's going to be some live, I believe there's preseason games will be on YouTube. And there's going to be some live, pre-game stuff or maybe post-game stuff. I don't want to get too colorful in my description of how that's all going to work because I'm not fully sort of briefed on that. But, again, I think if you look at what Stuart Johnston said at the time that he was asked questions about the media deal, he said he wasn't going for sort of maximum exposure and he wasn't going for maximum money. He was looking for some kind of hybrid of those where they could maximize the audiences they were reaching and maximize the dollars, but not with one at the expense of the other. And I think, by having a streaming partner, you bring in additional revenue stream. By having your traditional host broadcaster, you have continuity. And by having YouTube, you're going to reach a different audience, So I think those are all of the things that he talked about leading into this, are very much reflected in the deal.
Now, is there still going to be some games on CTV in the future too? Part of this deal?
I got to be careful because I don't speak for Bell Media on this stuff. So I'm going by my belief. I believe that there will continue to be games on both, but I have not been briefed on that formally and don't want to be held to the record on that one, if you know what I mean. I work for TSN. I don't know. I don't speak for them on everything. And I don't know for certain that has been determined, but I believe that's the case.
Because I know a lot of my friends that lived in the border states back in the 70s and 80s and 90s watched a lot of CFL games through CBC or CTV. So it would be nice. Hopefully they'll still have some games, hopefully on CTV going forward. Yeah,
I think, the league wants to cultivate an audience outside. And for most people, that's not going to be, being border cities to Canada. That's going to be through DAZN right? And one of the things I'll be curious to see is how much are they promoting? I think this is one thing to put games on, but how much are they going to invest in it to tell a global audience that the Canadian Football League is worthy of their time and entertainment? I don't know. I'll be curious about that.
Dave, since I got you on, I've had the pleasure of meeting Stuart Johnson last year at BMO Field. He gave me he gave me some time and spoke to me before an Argos game. I wanted to get your thoughts on Stuart Johnson overall, the job he's done so far, and do you feel, in your opinion, that the league's heading in the right direction under his leadership?
Well, it's funny because I think Stuart is the 9th or 10th commissioner that I've covered. There are some interim commissioners and some co-commissioners in there, but the number for me is about 9 or 10. And Stuart Johnston is unique for me in a couple. He's the first one who's younger than I am, cross that line. And he's the first one that I've ever worked for, because Stuart Johnston, of course, was president at TSN. And I would say, I told people this at the time he was hired, because there were a lot of nice things that were tweeted out about him from people at TSN, the names that everybody would recognize, the James Duthys, the Darren Dragers, people that aren't necessarily CFL people were, really saying positive things about Stuart leaving TSN. And I told people, I said, that is real. I mean, Stuart was really beloved and respected at TSN. There was a great amount of confidence in him, I think, from the people who worked there. And I, for one, can certainly speak that. And I think, we saw that confidence kind of justified in the way TSN came through, some people at the time considered a crisis, losing the NHL rights in 2013, I believe it was. TSN has flourished under Stuart's leadership after that event that a lot of people were worried about. And again, I think that's part of why his leadership was, so highly respected at TSN by people who work there. So I have a little different perspective on him covering him as a commissioner, because I'm more familiar with him. Stuart Johnston also has the distinction of being the first commissioner in my time who was actually hired from within the CFL's business environment. He was not an outsider to our business. And for better or worse, every single one of the other commissioners, and I've covered everyone since Donald Crump in 1991.
That's going back a ways.
That's going back a ways. Every one of them was not working in the business environment of the Canadian Football League. I mean, the closest might have been Jeffrey Orridge, who was, president of CBC Sports. So he was in the sport and television space, but he wasn't in the football space. And his lack of familiarity with the league showed, as somebody who covered him, I can tell you. I've come up with kind of a theory that a lot of CFL commissioners burn the trust of the governors through their learning curve, because there's so much to learn. You know what I mean? That by the time you've kind of got your feet wet and made some mistakes, you may have sort of looked like maybe you don't have the same confidence behind you in the board of governors that you did the day you were hired. In Stuart Johnston's case, he comes through the door eyes wide open. He knows the business model. He knows the challenges. He knows the personalities. He knows the dynamics. And make no mistake, the CFL is a unique league with a whole bunch of nuances, not just in the way the game is played on the field, but in the business of Canadian football as well. It's very specialized and very, nuanced. He understands all those things. So I think he has a huge advantage coming through the door on day number one, that he's not an outsider. And I mean, he knows the board of governors. Personally, he would have known them because he was running the business that was the CFL's biggest partner. So, and then from there, I think anytime you are hired to do a job, your job is to do it as you're asked to do it. And a lot of people don't like some of the changes that Stuart Johnston has brought in. And that's been much debated. And we certainly heard a lot of that at Grey Cup. But if you're judging him by whether he's doing what he was been asked to do, he's doing exactly what he was asked to do. If people have anger that they don't like some of the changes, direct them to the board of governors, because they're the ones who hired Stuart Johnston and said, we want you to change stuff. We want to refresh this league. We don't want to be the same league we've always been. That's his mandate. So, how do I think he's doing in that job? I think he's doing pretty well. I mean, I personally like the rule changes. I don't love the playoff format. I think it's actually not as bad as maybe some people think it is, with 8 out of 9 teams making the playoffs, because it's a very staggered. I can see that it's got some value. The thing I don't love about it is that to somebody who is a casual CFL fan who doesn't really pay attention to the league, the person you're trying to attract, they're going to hear 8 out of 9 teams make the playoffs. And that doesn't sound like a serious league. Now, I also would be okay with it if we are moving towards expansion and all of a sudden it's 8 out of 10 or 8 out of 11 or 8 out of 12. I think maybe that's one of the things that went off in some people's minds when this was introduced. Like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a sustainable playoff model long term, unless you're planning to add teams. So, I give you a long answer on this one. I think Stuart Johnson has done a very good job. I think he's learned some things, but I think he has stayed very true to the mission that he was given. And I think he's been, some people say, well, he's doing stuff behind closed doors. Well, he did that. Yeah, the rule changes he did. Absolutely. Because you know why? If they tried to do that in a cooperative way, it would have never happened. Like, I can guarantee you, never, ever, ever happens. You cannot change the game through a process like that. There's just too much adherence to tradition. It would not happen. But in terms of, a lot of the things he's talked about, he's been very transparent, about especially wanting to open up things to the media, make himself available, have pulling the mask off the neg list, other things that were sort of secretive or in the shadows or not, that people didn't get access to. I think he's made very good on that as well. So I know he believes that the CFL is in an attention economy, and they got to win. They got to be competitive for attention.
Well, Dave, the league's been 9 teams since 1958, and they haven't really grown. And they've been talking about expansion since I was 12 years old, back in 1984 with Halifax. So do you see in the next 5 years, Dave, in your opinion, do you see expansion going in the CFL? I've heard Quebec City and Halifax.
Yeah, I always like to say to people, to give them a sense of sort of how sort of, I don't want to say stale, but in a way it is kind of stale, the Canadian Football League sometimes can feel. And that is when I say the year that I was born, it had the Canadian Football League was 50% bigger than the National Hockey League. 50% bigger. 9 teams compared to 6. And so, I do think growth is important and change is important, because, you don't want to become a stale league. And the lack of growth of teams, and I lived through the U.S. expansion era. I'm probably one of the few people still covering the league who actually lived through that in its entirety. So I went to a couple of games in American cities and, covered, that the whole thing start to finish. But aside from that, it's been a 9-team league, as you say, since 1958. Okay, so why is that? There would be basically 2 reasons. One, lack of an owner. And lack of an owner is directly tied to lack of a good enough business model to attract an owner. Like you have to say, well, there hasn't been an owner. Well, okay, but why? Why do other leagues, why are they able to attract owners and this one league isn't? Because the business model hasn't been attractive enough. The other reason is stadium construction. I am also often prone to getting frustrated on X when people are debating all kinds of cities where CFL teams could or should be. And I jump on and say, folks, the 3 most important considerations of this are stadium, stadium, and stadium. Stop talking about putting teams in places where there is no stadium. And unless you have a stadium project or, a Commonwealth Games coming and you're going to get a stadium or something, you can't just fantasize that you're going to get a stadium, because the economics of financing outdoor stadiums in Canada is very, very, very difficult and challenging. So that's the other reason. So when we look at these 2, look, I'll tell you this, there's been a lot kind of splashed in the media about Halifax and a lot splashed in the media recently about Quebec City. I'll tell you bluntly, I think Quebec City is the one that's real. I don't think the league's going to have a team in Halifax before it's going to have one in Quebec City. In fact, I would give you very strong odds that if I had to pick one, it's a no-brainer. I think the reporting recently on Quebec City by the radio journalist in that city, I think it's accurate. I think the league has and again, it fits kind of what Stuart Johnston wants to be. He wants to change. He wants to show growth. Oh, the business model just changed. That's the other thing I think about. It's important to understand about Stuart Johnston is there is an interconnectivity, I think, to a lot of his ideas, right? So people look at one time and say, well, why would you do that? Right? Well, let's use the playoff format. Well, why did you do that, the playoff format? What do you do 8 out of 9 teams? Well, he did that because he could drive a lot more revenue in the TV deal with that playoff format than he could with the typical playoff format. Okay. So that drives revenue for that. And new revenue drives expansion. You see what I mean? It's like doom to doom to doom. And it's kind of an overused cliche, but he's playing chess, not checkers. Right. And so this is one thing I've kind of learned early on is you have to really understand there's an interconnectivity to a lot of his ideas. So I do think expansion is on the agenda now. I do think Quebec City is the target. And, it's going to be about getting a stadium built and finding somebody who finds the business model attractive enough to invest. And, it is a city that built an NHL-ready arena in 2015 without a team. So they don't seem to be afraid of stadium building, and I know other teams play there, but they built that to attract the NHL, and there's no sign that the NHL is coming, which again, I think is another great reason for the CFL to go there, because you're going to have a market of 850,000 and, you'll be sharing it with other minor professional sports teams, but no league that has the stature. I always say the CFL is a hybrid league. It has minor league qualities, it has major league qualities, but you'll be the big dog in town. Right? I mean, the Laval Rouge et Or, yes, that will be still considered the stars of youth sports there, but they only play 4 regular season games a year in a market of almost 1 million people. I mean, unless there were 150,000 people at those games, that doesn't make sense that you couldn't have a CFL team there as well.
Dave, you brought up stadiums, and right now 2 teams I think who need new stadiums are the Montreal Alouettes and the Calgary Stampeders. Mm-hmm. The Montreal Alouettes, do you see them in the future moving back into the renovated Olympic Stadium? And as for the Calgary Stampeders, do you know what the latest is on them getting a new stadium? Because McMahon Stadium is not really up to CFL standards anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not expertise on either of these, but I'll give you sort of my qualified opinion. And the qualifier is I'm not up close and haven't dug on either of these stories. Montreal a little more. I know that the Big O is undergoing a renovation, which I believe is due to be done in 27. The model that they seem to make work for a while was where you played your playoff game at the Big O, right? And you were able to drive revenue with a bigger crowd. I would be cautious about moving back to the Big O full time. I could see that maybe you do it from October on or something. You know what I mean? Or you create some special events and you use it. But going there full time, I mean, it's just such and I know they're doing a renovation of it, but the bones of the place are the same. It's just such an enormous place, right? It's amazing. The CFL once had a game there were 68,000 people in like 1977 or something. If for a league that is built where teams are supposed to be able to survive if they're drawing 20 to 25,000, that can feel really sparse there, as opposed to McGill, where I think you've got amazing atmosphere. I stood at on the sideline at the East Division final, November 24, and I thought, man, like from almost kickoff till the final gun, this place was just insane. So I know it doesn't meet the standards of modern amenities, and it probably means you can't drive the kind of revenue out of it that pro sports teams need to drive out of their facilities. And, that's a big part of it, concessions and all that. But I kind of I've heard people speculate about that. Right. And maybe what's old could be new. I mean, everybody was so happy to get out of the Big O. I mean, my God, when they moved to McGill, it was it was falling down, right? There's a tree they had to cut down that was growing out of the stand. So it wasn't like it was, the Rolls Royce when they moved into it. It was like, wow, this is like falling apart, but at least we're not at the Big O, right? I think be careful. Remember that lesson. We would rather have a dilapidated outdoor stadium than play at the Big O. So I don't know that I believe in the Big O as a solution for the Alouettes beyond, say, one-off games like playoffs or special events.
Or a Grey Cup, maybe.
Yeah, Grey Cup, absolutely. No, for sure. Right? They've had a couple of them there, right? That makes sense. Calgary is the mystery one to me because, God, that's a city with a lot of money, and an ownership group with a lot of money. And it's funny. I have two stadiums that I was in as a kid, about somewhere between 12, 14 years old the first time I was in it, 13 around that. One of them was Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, the old one that they're tearing down right now. And one of them was the McMahon Stadium in Calgary. Two stadiums that every time I'm there professionally, it feels exactly like I was there as a kid. Like I'd stand on the field at Highmark Stadium and say, like, this is the same place my dad and I went to in 1979. And when I go to McMahon, I'm like, this looks exactly. I mean, even more so because they changed some of the finishes at Highmark, but the structure is the same. But honestly, when I look up at the stands at McMahon, I feel like it's 1981. I'm standing there, as a 13-year-old going to see the BC Lions play. But I don't have an answer for you. But I'll tell you this: it's one thing when CFL facilities don't match those of other major professional sports that can spend more money, but it's another thing when you fall behind the teams in your league. And Calgary has fallen behind the teams in its league. And I don't, that doesn't, I say on the surface, and it's not a story I've dug into, doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And the Grey Cup's going to be there this year, and that's I'm just curious to see how it's going to go. Obviously, Calgary loves their CFL, but it's just the facility is really obsolete, and I was really surprised they gave Calgary this year's Grey Cup, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I think it's if you look at it, you can't have it in Montreal. You just had two in Hamilton. And Toronto is the last one here. Did not go. So You've basically taken three teams out of the mix right now because of Hamilton having the double, and Montreal not able to host in Toronto. I think people are still leery about it. So, I think that's part of it. But like Calgary's a great Cup city. I think it would be great to see the Stamps be a little better supported than they have the last few years. But I mean, that's been more of an Alberta thing than just a Calgary thing overall, I would say.
Because the Flames are getting their new arena now. Are the Flames the owners of the Stampeders too?
They are
they
still, yes.
Are they? Okay. Yeah. Well, hopefully, maybe in the next 5 years they can get a stadium done. Because I really think long term that would help that franchise.
No question.
Now, Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts too. Stuart Johnson, the commissioner. Do you feel he comes out and addresses the fans enough, or that's something you would like to see a little more from him?
Well, I know what you mean by addresses the fans. I think. The way commissioners normally address the fans is through the media, and I think, he and commissioners have to be careful not to be too out front all the time, right? There's a balance there. So I think you saw when Stuart was traveling across the league, he would do media availability with people, and answer questions. And some of those would be local questions and things like that. There was not a fan state of the league address like there had been at Grey Cup, I believe. There was more of an informal setting for Stuart, I believe. But there was an opportunity for fans to interact with him, I believe. But I mean, that's kind of part of what a commissioner does, but it's not really like the top of the job description. I mean, how much does Gary Bettman, interact with the fans? How much does Roger Goodell interact with the fans? I can tell you that would not be now. Part of the charm of the Canadian Football League is the league is a little different, and people feel like they should be able to walk up and talk to the commissioner and maybe even have a beer with him. And that's, I think, one of the real charms of our league. So, I think Stuart, when it's a Grey Cup, he's out and about and he's meeting people and getting feedback. And let's put it this way. I don't think he was caught off guard that some of the changes he made were going to be unpopular with some of the fans, right? But that you had to have the kind of courage of your convictions to live through that. But I don't think he's hiding from the fans by any means.
And when I met him at BMO Field last year, he was very approachable. So I basically asked him some of the questions or my concerns, and he did answer them as well. Hey, Dave, before we wrap the show up in a few minutes, I just wanted to get your thoughts quickly, overall impressions of week one in the CFL, and which game to you stood out the most?
Boy, I mean, two barn burners, the first two. I'm trying to choose between them. I'm, I mean, it's a last second one or an overtime one. I mean, take your pick. I'm gonna say that the Winnipeg Calgary game, just because I think the dynamics of that game, the way the running backs took it over in the first half was kind of, you don't see that very often. It was kind of almost felt like a bit of a throwback type of CFL game, and two backs that I think are very similar in that they are very physical runners, but when they get a gap, they can burst. And we saw that from both of them. So the fact that you had that element, and then you had, both quarterbacks playing superbly, and maybe again, mostly in the second half when maybe the defense has kind of shifted their emphasis. But I mean, that Hamilton Montreal was, I don't think, as clean a game as Winnipeg Calgary was. So that's definitely the one that stood out to me.
And what games are you looking forward in week 2? Obviously, the Argonauts are back in action this Friday night. Hamilton is at Winnipeg, and the other game is BC Saskatchewan.
Boy, all three, because there's things that really intrigue me. Just, I think BC is, finished last year strong, and I could see them coming out this year strong. Hamilton and Winnipeg, I think Hamilton, obviously getting to overtime against Montreal, they had a really good week. But I'm kind of curious now to see if Winnipeg can look like that 2 weeks in a row, because that was, that was better than I thought they were going to look overall. And in Montreal and Toronto, I'm real curious to see Chad Kelly, hasn't played since that be a game in Montreal. I'm sure that'll be talked a lot about on the broadcast, that it was, a year, November of 24. And the last time this guy played a full season in the league, he was the best player in the league. So, I think that's kind of, we haven't talked a lot about Chad Kelly this spring. He's kind of just shown up at camp, and I've, talked to him a couple of times when I've been out there. But say, I gave you one thing on all three games. So I'm excited for all three, especially this time of year is like, I always say it's like unwrapping presents, right? It's like everything's new. Ooh, I want to see what these Bombers are like. I want to see, what the Argo coaching staff like. It's every week. I watch the games with a different kind of focus in the first month of the season, just because I'm learning so much, about these teams and the players and tendencies and all that.
And this is a really good test for the Argonauts, because Montreal is a really good team, and they capitalize on mistakes. And that's what did Hamilton in, was the pick six and the fumble in overtime. So for the Argonauts to have a chance to win in Montreal, they're going to have to play a clean football game. And also too, Dave, last year they couldn't run the ball. That was one of the worst running offenses that I've ever seen in Argo history. So I think it's going to be important for the Argos to have somewhat of a running game, so Chad Kelly doesn't have to do it all himself.
Well, Montreal, Jason Moss, like every coach preaches against turnovers, but Jason Moss really preaches against turnovers. And I know them losing by fumbling on the goal line in the Grey Cup, and it was not the way they wanted to see that game go. And they lost a playoff game the year before in their final game with a series of turnovers. So, you see why he loves being on the right side of the turnover battle, because that was a difference, certainly at Hamilton Stadium on Thursday night.
Dave, will you be at one of those games, or are you going to be at the CFL on TSN panel?
I will be in studio this weekend. Yeah, so I am not out. I was at Hamilton's game on Thursday night, did some pregame, and then stayed for the game. But I'm not out on the road this weekend.
And I will be at the Tiger Cats BC game on June 19th as media. I'm really looking forward to that. And also, the Argos, their first 9 games are away from BMO Field, so I feel it's important for them to get off to a good start against a very good Montreal team too.
No, absolutely. I think, I think the Argos are okay with this whole being on the road thing now, but the question will be what will it be like in 8 weeks. And certainly, everything's different around a football team when you're coming off a win. So if you're going to be away from home and you're going to have to be making some adjustments, and you're not going to have all the creature comforts, that'll all feel a lot better if you're winning.
And just quick thoughts on Mike Miller as the head coach of the Argos. Have you had a chance to speak to him yet?
Yeah, I actually know Mike, probably among the assistants in the league, was a guy I know better than I know a lot, just because we'd had occasion to talk, about, a lot about had to do with Chad Kelly, and coaching him but just a guy, very approachable guy that I've always enjoyed the opportunity to speak to. Look, I think a big part of why he got hired is, he's been an offensive mind in this league for a number of years. He worked in the National Football League. He was an offensive coordinator in a Super Bowl for Arizona. So he had by CFL standards for an American coach is a pretty impressive resume. Not that many American coaches come here, having been an offensive coordinator in a Super Bowl. Mark Trustman did as well. So I think, that was part of it. But I think a big part of why he got the job is if the Argonauts are committed to Chad Kelly, and clearly they are, you probably want to hire the guy that Chad Kelly really trusts and really listens to, and the guy who understands Chad Kelly. Because one of the things, remember, Chad Kelly's worst game in the CFL is no mystery which one it is. It's the Eastern Final of 2023 against Montreal, where he throws the pick six to Marc-Antoine Dequoy early on, and the wheels just come off from there. I think it is significant that Mike Miller was not there that day. That Mike Miller had left the team a few weeks earlier. He was undergoing treatment. And a guy who Chad Kelly probably really relies on to, calm him down and get his head in the right place, after a jarring moment like that early in a big game, wasn't there. So again, I just think it's, the relationship between your quarterback and your head coach is phenomenally important. And that's, I think, a big part of why the Argonauts went to Mike Miller. And I'm curious to see, he talks about just, fast, smart, physical football, and, I think things are, a little different than they were under Ryan Dinwiddie, from what I understand, just, maybe not as laid back kind of in the atmosphere, but every coach has their own style and has to put their stamp on it. And I'm curious to see what Mike Miller will do.
And Dave, as we wrap this show up, just quick thoughts. I know you cover the Buffalo Bills. Just quick thoughts on the Bills firing Sean McDermott and bringing in Joe Brady. And did Joe Brady's relationship with Josh Allen have an impact on him getting the head coach of Buffalo? And from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot there. The Bills are never boring. First of all, I was surprised, as I think were most people in the media. They can look back now and maybe say, yeah. But I think if you ask, I was asked the question after the game in Denver on the field on SportsCenter. What do I think of Sean McDermott's future? And I said, I think he's absolutely not in danger. I mean, and I think you can make the argument. Here's the tricky thing about McDermott getting fired. I think you can make the argument that Sean McDermott may have done his best coaching job with last year's Bills team. Like in terms of what he had to deal with and how he made it work and the decisions he made that paid off in game or in between games. I think that was maybe a high watermark for Sean McDermott. Okay, so why does he get fired? Because he's got a generational quarterback in Josh Allen, who's now been to the playoffs. I should know the number, but it's, 7, whatever number of years.
7 or 8 out of 9 years. Yeah.
And you got to one AFC championship game. And you're the defensive head coach. And it's not that your quarterback, some people I hear people still say to me, well, Josh Allen is not great in the playoffs. He's fantastic in the playoffs. He's a top 1% all-time quarterback in the playoffs. Okay. Did he play his best game in the divisional playoff game in Denver last January? No, that was not his best. But overall, his body of work in the playoffs is phenomenal.
I agree.
He plays for a team that gives up a boatload of points in the playoffs every year. And when you have a defensive-minded head coach, eventually that is going to catch up with you. That's why Sean McDermott got fired, because the guy whose side of the ball is defense couldn't find a way to keep other teams under 20 points in the playoffs when it mattered. And the Bills, look at their scores. It's not the offense that's letting them down. And there's injuries, factors, all kinds of that. So while I was really surprised by the McDermott firing, because I was looking at the job he'd done on that year. And I know that he's a guy who obviously has had, other than Marv Levy, unprecedented success. And I think his win percentage actually might be higher than Marv Levy's. And again, him and Brandon Beane were kind of together. But when you stand back and look at the bigger picture, it starts to make a little more sense. Now, the Joe Brady hiring surprised me. I don't, it just because it felt like they were, okay, if you're getting rid of Sean McDermott, you're really going for change here. And you bring in a guy who, like I said about Mike Miller and Chad Kelly, has a tremendous relationship with Josh Allen. That matters. Josh Allen is the biggest investment the Buffalo Bills have. He's the most important asset they have. And anything you can do that maximizes Josh Allen, that behooves you to do it. And so I think that's a big part of why Joe Brady does get the job. The Bills offense, the last 2 years, I mean, 2 years ago, they were the highest scoring Bills team. If they were the highest scoring Bills team of all time, they scored more touchdowns than any Bills. There's a qualifier, first Bills team to score 30 passing, 30 rushing touchdowns, most touchdowns, whatever. It ranks among the all-time highest scoring Bills teams. And in some categories, it is number one. And then last year, you have some regression, but you also had some regression on the roster from players that you would have expected to step up, like Keon Coleman, for instance. You would look like you would have had better availability from Josh Palmer. Those would be sort of the two biggest examples, but even Dalton Kincaid, is hurt a lot of the year. So, but I don't think people felt like, but you had got an NFL rushing champion in James Cook, so you're still scoring a ton of points. So, I think that side of the ball has not always got the most resources, but it's got the most production. And maybe that is kind of what earns Joe Brady the job. He was certainly a serious candidate for other NFL teams as head coach. It seems to be somebody that not just Josh Allen, but the players in general respect. And it's a fascinating organization because of the dynamics that kind of and the recent history and all that's at stake. Josh Allen turned 30 like a week ago, and that freaks some people out because now, the generational talent is now in his 30s. We're gonna have to start keeping an eye on his age and how he might play differently and all these things that inevitably come when great young buck quarterbacks start to mature physically.
And they have a new stadium they got to break into this year as well.
So and a new stadium, which is going to be, it's hard for me to imagine. Like I said earlier in the show, I first went to Ralph Wilson Stadium or whatever, Highmark Stadium, I think 1979,
Wow.
My dad and I kind of did an annual trip every year right up to, until I was working in the business. So, and then even a few times after that, but, sporadically here and there. So no, it's a place I'm between my work. I have to think, how many Bills games have I watched in that stadium?
I went to 32. Wow. 32.
I'm trying to think. Well, I've covered the team every home game for the last 4 years. I covered it for like 2 years in 08, 09. So that's 6 years of home games right there. That gets you to about 48. And then I've probably been in another 30 on top of that, maybe something like that. So I spent a lot of time in that stadium. No question.
My first NFL game there was in September 1997. Bills and Colts, Jim Harbaugh against Todd Callens. Okay. Everybody wanted to leave at halftime. The Colts were up 26-0. I said, the hell with it. I drove all the way to Buffalo. I told my late brother-in-law, we're going to stay. And sure enough, the Bills came back and won that game 37-35. And this was without Jim Kelly. And this was when they were in a transition after Kelly retired in 96. So that was their second biggest comeback ever against the Colts, down 26-0. That was my first experience that stadium in 1997.
Wow, I'll tell you, my first experience in that stadium was Bills Colts also, but it was the Baltimore Colts.
Yeah.
Before they moved to Indianapolis. So that's it goes back. That was the very first game I saw. It was Bills Colts. Yeah.
Hey, as we wrap the show up, Dave, being an Eagles fan and doing freelance media work, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Eagles. Do you feel they received enough from the Patriots in the A.J. Brown trade? And do you feel this is going to make the Eagles better long-term without A.J.? Obviously, A.J. is a top 5 receiver.
And I meant to look this up before we do the show because I did actually study this trade, but remind me just off top what they got for what the deal was for.
A first-round pick in 2028 and a 5th-round pick.
Yeah. Okay. I knew that's where it landed, but I didn't know the numbers just to pull in my head. Look, I like it for that. I mean, AJ Brown is he 31?
He's in the 30s. Right? He's in his 30s.
Yeah. Like big body receivers like that, I think kind of age out relatively quickly. So I would be worried about his odometer, and the thing is about a deal like that, it's probably got, now maybe they're making this fully aware of this. It's probably got like a 2-year window to really do what they want it to do. Right. But they're looking at it and say, hey, we were in the Super Bowl last year. we have a quarterback who was almost the MVP in his second season, and we did it with a pretty thin receiving core overall. If we give this guy a stud for 2 years, we can win a Super Bowl. That's what they're thinking. Now, the question is, I don't think motivation is going to be a problem at this time. And again, Mike Vrabel knows what he's getting and all that. Not that he was motivated, but it was clearly not harmonious in the locker room. But, if he gets hurt and by next year he's a year older, and, I think the Eagles had to make a move. They couldn't have another year. So it was one where, they didn't have the option of, or we don't trade him. So, I think you get a first round pick. Those players sometimes play a long time. Sometimes they miss, but sometimes they play a long time. You could be talking about the guy that the Eagles are going to take with that pick a long time after A.J. Brown is retired. So I think that given the limited window that A.J. Brown had left, and given that he absolutely worn out his time in Philadelphia, I think the Eagles did okay.
And I think Jalen Hurts, now we're going to see how good a quarterback he is without A.J. Brown as well. Because he's played in 2 Super Bowls and he's won a Super Bowl MVP, but it seems like he's criticized and scrutinized. So we're going to see how he does without A.J. Brown. And like I said, the Eagles last year, they just offensively, they just were in neutral the entire year. So it's going to be interesting to see under their new offensive coordinator, and now with the subtraction of A.J. Brown, how this Eagles offense looks in 2026.
Boy, that is a Rolodex that spins. Eagles offensive coordinator. How many, like for a team that has a lot of success, how many in the last 5 years? Is it 5?
I was 5 or 6. 5 or 6.
I can understand that if the team sucked, right?
Yeah.
But look, some of them I think Shane Steichen was an Eagles offensive coordinator, right? So some of them are getting head coaching opportunities, but man, for a team that's had a lot of success, won a Super Bowl, been to another, they're always reinventing the offensive playbook every year. So,
hey David, we're going to wrap the show up. Where can our audience again follow you on social media and on TSN?
Well, on TSN, you can find me on SportsCenter. Usually a couple nights a week at the very least. I also find my work on tsn.ca, both videos. I write columns. If you Google my name in TSN site there, or search my name on TSN site, you can see a lot of columns I write. And I sometimes share content and occasionally opinions on X at TSN Dave Naylor, at TSN Dave Naylor.
And hopefully we'll see maybe some more Argo practices in Guelph. They'll be here for a couple more months in my backyard. So that is a great opportunity for me to speak to some of the players. And they're great to get to know these guys too. Yeah, no,
I expect to be out there. And even through training camp, I found myself a couple nice lunch spots in Guelph. So, now I know where to go when I go back. So, it's a nice setting and great facilities there. The Argonauts are lucky, not every U Sport team in Canada has facilities like that. So, they're in a good situation there.
Well, Dave, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. And by the way, I saw one of your posts on X the other day. I want to wish your dad a happy 88th birthday. And being a National Lacrosse League Hall of Famer and 3-time Mental Cup champion, one of my favorite guests is Brendan Shanahan's brother, Brian Shanahan. And I love the game of lacrosse now. I follow it a lot. It's a great sport. It doesn't get enough recognition.
No, and people who love lacrosse really, really love lacrosse, and it's been great to watch lacrosse thrive. I mean, I remember even as a kid, my dad was always worried that lacrosse was just going to die out, because it sometimes was known for, some of the violence and the fights that were associated with the game in the sort of 70s and 80s. And, but you had field lacrosse thrive, box lacrosse is thriving. It's really become North American wide, one of the fastest growing sports. And in fact, I was in Halliburton on the weekend at a pizza place, and I saw a flyer that a former pro lacrosse player was running like a 12-week lacrosse program in Halliburton, so it just another, I looked at that and thought, man, that's just another indication of the growth of the sport. My dad, just lacrosse was everything kind of in our family. And I know that when he talks about those times, he's the last living member of the Brampton Excelsiors team that won 3 straight Middle Cups in 57, 58, and 59.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I know when he talks about those days, they were the greatest days of his life, to go out west and, play a Middle Cup. They went out by rail in those days. He's 17, 18 years old. That's really, I was there when he was inducted in the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame. That was in 2013, I think, which was really special for him. So it's I grew up even as a kid when I followed hockey, my dad had me like memorize all the NHL players who had also played lacrosse. Like I knew who they all were. I didn't like they're like maybe 24 NHL players that had played up to junior lacrosse, and I knew who they all were. My dad had coached some of them or refereed some of them, or sort of that. So it was fun. Even hockey, I watched through sort of the prism of lacrosse.
TSN does a great job with the National Lacrosse League. And one of my first guests who believed in my show 7 years ago, Pat Gregor, kind of got me into the National Lacrosse League. And a lot of my media opportunities came with the Buffalo Bandits. And it's good for the league to see the Toronto Rock back on top for now. And I'm looking forward to the lacrosse starting up again in the fall.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in Denver for the AFC Championship game, there was a Colorado Mammoth game, on that night. It just seemed sort of the attention that got. And there was actually, I walked by a fan who was in a Brampton Excelsiors jersey.
Wow.
In downtown Denver.
Denver. What are the odds?
And I stopped the guy and I said, I'm sorry, is that a Brampton Excelsiors jersey? He said, yeah. I said, where and why and what on earth are you doing with that? And he wasn't Canadian. He was from, down there. And he said, oh, well, so-and-so is my favorite player. And, this is the jersey that he wore in Brampton or something. So, the same way people go to Buffalo Bills games, sometimes wearing the Josh Allen 17 from Wyoming, right? You see quite a few of them in the crowd at a Bills game. This guy was kind of doing the same thing, but yeah, I just about fell over when I saw Brampton Excelsior's jersey on the streets of Denver.
Hey, Dave, one day you're going to have to write your own book, by the way.
Well, I've actually on that. Let me just tell you, I actually got a book coming out. Can I plug it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So 10 years ago, Al Mackey, veteran journalist, now retired. I work with him at the Globe and Mail, and I did a book called 50 Super Bowls. And it was about the 50 Super Bowls. And sold a lot of books and had a lot of fun doing it. And this fall, we have coming out 60 Super Bowls. So it's the same book, refreshed, 10 additional chapters, a little more additional content. If you didn't get the first one, get this one. When it comes out, I'll be throwing it out on social media of where people can order it. So I have a Super Bowl book. Super Bowl 60 Super Bowls coming out.
Because I'm definitely going to buy that book. And by the way, I have the voice of the New England Patriots coming on my shelf soon. Bob Sochi, he's got a book coming out called The Specialists about the importance of special teams in professional football.
It's funny. I was just thinking about something the other day. I actually had a thought watching the game tonight because we were rewatching some of the Winnipeg Calgary game, and Trey Vavel made a few plays, and people talked about how he was special teams player of the year last year and such. And I was like, it does not make any sense in the voting at year end to have guys like that going up against kickers. Like they shouldn't be in the same category. Like, because they're special teams players, you know what I mean? Because you when you vote for defensive player of the year, you've got defensive linemen and linebackers and defensive backs. They all do different jobs, but they all have the same sort of job, right? To stop somebody, right? To take the football away and stop somebody. And on offense, again, whether you're talking about guards or tackles or centers, the offensive linemen, their job is to block for the run and protect. But kickers and returners have wildly different jobs. And I was watching Trey Vavel last night. I said, there should be different categories for kickers and returners when we vote at the end of the year. So that was my CFL epiphany from today.
And I had the pleasure of interviewing Mickey Donovan 2 weeks ago, and Mickey's such a great guy and gave me a lot of his time as well. And you need all three units to be a successful football team: defense, offense, and special teams. Well,
especially in Canada, that's one of the things that I think we really cherish about our game is that, when you play special teams in this league, and there are a lot of guys, that's all they do, but you don't want to sound like that's diminished. It's such an important part of the game. And I don't know how often you would look at a CFL game sheet and find out that the play that, decided the game happened on special teams, either, changing field position, if not a score.
Well, Dave, I want to say thank you so much. I apologize for keeping you over 40 minutes, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming back on my show. And you have an open invite to come back on, and let me know when your book is out. And I would definitely like to buy it and read up on the 60 Super Bowls, including Super Bowl 52 and 59, where the Eagles won.
There you go. Yeah, for a while it seemed like the Eagles were never going to be. They were kind of where the Bills are now, right? getting to the big ones and then falling flat. So they figured it out. We'll see if Buffalo will.
The Chicago Cubs can win a World Series. The Bills one day will get theirs as well. But
Red Blacks won a Grey Cup. There you go.
Yeah. Well, Dave, hopefully we'll see you at one of the stadiums this summer. And again, thank you so much for doing this tonight too.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
And I will be in touch with you on DM about the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame people too.
Certainly. Please do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
All right, everyone. That wraps up season 14, episode 2, overall 717 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership, located at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. As we wrap up the show, guys, I want to say thank you again to Dave Naylor, the TSN NFL CFL insider, for coming on tonight and talking some CFL and NFL and a little lacrosse with us as well. Before we wrap this show up, guys, I'm going to play you the rest of my interview I did at the Comic-Con this past Friday and interviewed Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years. And we're going to play this interview with Jason Hervey right now that I did on Friday at the Niagara Falls Comic-Con. Thanks to Chad Smith for the media pass as well. And Jason is an actor and a TV producer, and he's been on the Wonder Years as Wayne Arnold and also on Police Academy movie and Back to the Future and a number of other TV shows as well. Describe yourself as an actor.
Well, I never take it too seriously. I take my job and my craft very seriously, but the actual acting and the performative part of it, I just try to have fun and be in that moment as that character would, so I don't take that too seriously. I don't overthink it. I just, try to, embody and become that character. And then when you do, it kind of comes out in that way. So, but, always have fun. Always would have fun with any part that I ever did, big or small.
A quick question for you, Jason. What are your thoughts on today's TV and the movie industry?
Well, I mean, I'm actually a big fan of television right now. And really, not so much network television, but cable and streamers, and whether it's Apple or Netflix or or Amazon. I mean, there really are some amazing series right now. I mean, Your Friends and Neighbors, with John Hamm, amazing. Ozarks on Netflix with Jason Bateman. There's just I think there is and especially with a lot of those streamers putting bigger budgets to television, and having those incredible actors and those feature film directors coming to do television. I think it's a pretty exciting time.
Jason, what's a fun fact about yourself that the fans might not know about you?
I love to play pickleball. I not everybody knows that. I'm a huge fan of professional wrestling. Now, a lot of people do know that. That's not a secret.
Have you met Sergeant Slaughter yet?
I did. I rode in the same car with him when we were crossing the border last night from Buffalo into Niagara Falls. Yep, I remember growing up watching him, and we had a fun conversation on the ride to the hotel and everything like that. So I kind of geeked out for Sergeant Slaughter a bit in his matches with Hulk Hogan, may rest in peace, and Iron Sheik, and some of the greats.
And just quick thoughts on Eric Bischoff.
Love him. I mean, he's my brother, my much older brother. No, I love Eric. Eric's family since 1991, always has been, always will be, and he's killing it right now with Real American Freestyle Wrestling. And if anybody is out there and you haven't got a chance to check it out, it's on Fox Nation. Real American Freestyle Wrestling. It's incredible. And Jason, any projects you are able to share with us that you're working on? I am working on a few projects. In fact, a really big documentary. But that really is all I can't say anything more than that about it right now. But everyone, if they remember this interview, they'll remember me talking about this in early part of next year. And finally, do you still
still keep in touch with anybody from the Wonder Years?
All of them, all the time. Yes.
Well, Jason, it was an honor to be able to interview you. Thank you so much, and continued success, and enjoy Niagara Falls Comic Con this weekend.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you for the time.
That was Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years, who was at the Niagara Falls Comic Con. And again, I want to say thank you to Chad Smith for arranging a media pass. That was my first time at a Niagara Falls Comic Con, and I got to meet Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk, back in the 70s and 80s. I got to meet Vicki Lawrence, who was on the Carol Burnett Show and Mama's Family, and also Mindy Cohn, Natalie from The Facts of Life, as well as Sergeant Slaughter, WWF champion. I managed to speak to him too, and also I managed to speak to Peter Finelli, who was in I Can't Hardly Wait movie. He was also in Supergirl and a number of other TV shows as well. So I want to say thank you to Peter, and also Harry Waters Jr., who played Marvin Barry in the Back to Future movies, in the first one and the second one as well. So please check out my Niagara Falls Comic Con media work on my YouTube channel, TikTok, my social media pages. I did a number of interviews, as well as an owner of the fudge company called Chocolate Moonshine Company. They have really good fudge. I interviewed one of their owners, Mark Schwartz, as well. So yeah, like Niagara Falls Comic Con, just go to any of my social media pages, my YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and you'll see all my content there as well. And I hope to be at another Comic Con in the future. As we wrap up the show, guys, the next Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by BarryCullen.com, is going to take place Tuesday, June 9th at 5 p.m. Eastern, with special guest Flo Labrado. She is with Olive and Grace Leadership Coaching out of Florida. So we're going to bring on Flo Labrado. This will be her second time on our show tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. And I am working on more shows with more great guests coming up, as well as the Argo Bells podcast show with Nick Small and myself will return soon, as the Argos will take on Montreal this Friday, June 12th at 7:30, I believe, from McGill University Stadium. And looking forward to that as well. And before we wrap up the show, guys, again, at Barry Cullen Chevrolet, check out a 2027 Chevrolet Bolt. It is Canada's lowest price electric vehicle, EV, that has over 400 kilometers of estimate range, starting at $39,999 MSRP. The 2027 Chevy Bolt LT offers up to 422 of estimate range. For more information about the 2020 Chevy Bolt, please visit Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall, or check out their website, barrycullen.com, or give them a call at 519-824-0210 and tell them Chris Palme sent you as well. And I want to say thank you to Dave Naylor from TSN, again, the NFL CFL insider for TSN, Dave Naylor, for coming on here today. And of course, I want to say thank you to you, the audience, for watching this show live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Twitch, and LinkedIn as well. And also thank you to my audience on my audio platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Good Pods, for listening into this show as well. And that is about it for tonight, guys. We've got NBA action on tonight. We've got Game 3 going on in the NBA Finals between the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks. The Knicks are up 2-0 and now have the next two games in New York. So it's critical for the Spurs to win tonight. No NBA teams ever come back from 0-3. So Spurs, Knicks, they should be probably starting the third quarter right now. And we've got the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs taking tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Game 4. Vegas leads Carolina 2-1 in a terrific series, but don't count out the Carolina Hurricanes yet. I still think this series is going to go 7 games. I still have Carolina winning this series. I think 7 games as well. And congratulations to the American Hockey League Eastern Division champion Toronto Marlies with their big win last night in Scranton Wilkes-Barre against the Penguins. I believe they won that game 3-2 in overtime. Alex Nylander scored the winning goal. So the Marlies are now going to the American Hockey League Calder Cup Championship for the first time since 2018, and they'll wait the winner of the Colorado Eagles versus Chicago Wolves series, I believe, is going to game 6 or game 7 as well. So Colorado Chicago winner will take on the Toronto Marlies in the American League Calder Cup Championship. And the Marlies are a terrific product, and it's amazing what they did. And I don't think anyone expected them to get this far in the playoffs, but they've been really good in the playoffs and especially on the road. So look for the Marlies in the Calder Cup Championships series starting next week against either Colorado or the Chicago Wolves as well. And again, I want to say thank you to Dave Naylor from TSN coming on tonight to talk CFL, NFL, and a little bit about lacrosse as well. And Dave has a big baseball card collection as well, which I did not know about. So, and that is about it, guys. I am looking forward to my next show. Tuesday, June 9th at 5 o'clock with Flo Loblotto from Olive and Grace Leadership Coaching out of Florida. And also, guys, I will be down at Toronto Argonauts practice tomorrow, and I'm going to get another 1 or 2 player interviews as well. So make sure you check out my Toronto Argonauts content here on my social media pages, as well as my Niagara Falls Comic Con as well. And that is about it tonight, guys. I hope everybody enjoys the NBA game between the Spurs and Knicks. And I want to say thank you to Dave Naylor from TSN for coming on. And thank you, the audience, for watching and listening to this show. And of course, to Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership for being a part of this show as well. I hope everybody has a great night. And we'll see you back here tomorrow night at 5 o'clock for another edition of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, hosted by yours truly, Chris Palme, and brought to you by our friends at Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership here in Guelph.